Catholic Education Sandhurst acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters that this podcast is recorded on.
Welcome back to Season 2 of Magnify Matters. In this episode, Kate Fogarty and Tim Edwards look back on a big year and set the course for what's next in Magnify Sandhurst. From UK insights to local action, this episode maps how we go early, go targeted, and go together in 2026. Together, Tim and Kate explore what we learned from visiting high-performing UK trusts, why early identification and intervention matter, writing, spelling, and literacy priorities for 2026, expanding Ochre beyond maths into science and strengthening a knowledge-rich pathway into secondary, and what's ahead for 2026, including system-wide oral language screening, a tiered wellbeing curriculum, and explicit culture statement for Catholic Education Sandhurst. Whether you're in the classroom or leading a school, Season 2 sets out the next steps for lifting learning across Sandhurst. Now join us as we magnify what truly matters in education.
Well, hello everyone and welcome back to Season 2 of Magnify Matters. It's Kate Fogarty here from Catholic Education Sandhurst and I'm here today with Tim Edwards, our Assistant Director of Learning and Teaching, and we're really here to have a little bit of a chat of where we're at. It's week 6 of term 4 and a lot has happened this year, so we thought it might be good to do a bit of a roundup and a little bit of pointing towards what's coming down the track next year and also what some of the exciting podcasts we've got coming your way over the next few weeks. So Tim, how are you doing?
Going well, Kate. Thanks for the intro and great to be back for Season 2 of Magnify Matters.
Lots of energy right at the end of the year. That's fantastic. So Tim, last time we did a podcast together, we were not far off heading off to England to go and visit multi-academy trusts. And we and Ash and Paul Bizanella had 2 weeks really visiting multi-academy trusts, 8 different entities who we met with over that time, most of them school trusts, some of them other important partners for us in Catholic Education Sandhurst. And I thought it might be good if we just start with, it's 15, 16 weeks since then. I mean, it was an absolute mind-bending set of experiences and just incredible to see so many professionals doing an amazing job building school systems that's impacting student learning in really profound ways. What's hanging around still for you?
Firstly, thanks. It was a fabulous trip and opportunity, and I think the 4 of us, all the miles covered, got on pretty well and covered a lot of ground both professionally and in our transit. The parts that got me were that as a country exploring education, whilst you could pick holes in Ofsted and go and discuss all of that, it was something that every person in every school that we're in and every trust were able to reference in terms of expectation setting. So, of course, you can challenge and discuss the way in which that's implemented, and we're not going to do that today. But they were very clear around what they wanted to achieve and more purpose-filled in terms of how they're going to get there at a trust level. And I think that was in every trust that we visited.
Yeah, so we went to a couple of Catholic trusts, so they had 10 or 15 schools each, and then we went on to some of the really big ones, similar size to ourselves, 50 to 60 schools right across England, but all to a school, very low socioeconomic situations for their families, really tough social conditions going on in the landscape around the schools. But similarly for me, what stuck out or what's still sitting with me is the really explicit sense of their own culture. Each trust had their own flavour that came through really clearly, and some of them were religious, a couple Muslim, obviously the Catholic ones, some that were secular trusts. So trust is the same as what we would call a school system like CESL or DOBSL in Ballarat, so similar setup. Really clear on their culture, what it was to be a person, an adult who worked in that trust, what the expectations were of those people in terms of, as you say, the goals that were set for them around student achievement and growth. And that's growth across academic, social, emotional, physical, really comprehensive thinking about what is expected and wanted for every single child so that they can reach their best version of themselves. And then what are the behaviours that come from that? And I think that for me was really challenging. We've got lots of great stuff, and I see this in lots of the Catholic systems around Australia. We name our values, usually gospel values and things from church teaching, but to actually take that a step further and really think cleanly about, because we hold these values, if you work in this organisation, we expect you to be X, Y or Z in your behaviours. And that explicit explaining of the culture really allowed for the leaders in the schools, so principals, deputies and people leading various departments or projects, to leverage those behaviours to keep pushing the envelope in terms of making sure that the best things were happening for the kids. And I think we saw a lot of other really cool stuff that was happening in those schools and programs and projects and amazing teaching and great activities and all sorts of things. And at the trust level, really coherent organisation of the way they use resources and, stuff that's really interesting to us. But the thing that's sitting with me is that care and attention and deliberate thinking around, this is who we are, so this is what we stand for, this is what we value, and so this is how we behave. And that, clearly drove incredible achievement across those schools.
And I think part of that, just in hearing you speak to that, Kate, it was done in a way, and obviously their point of maturity of trusts. So the trust that we visited, I think the smallest was 16 schools and the biggest was 50 plus. So pretty good fit for us. But they seemed to be able to do it in a way that the school people didn't really feel done to. And I was really impressed by that, because you can set targets and goals and direct how expectations should happen. But I didn't feel, and I don't know about you, but I didn't feel that it was overly directed, enforced by way of a top down. It was, wear this because this is who we are and this is how we work here. And obviously at some point in time as that was rolled out, it would have felt a certain way to the people at the places, but I didn't see it when we were there. I don't know about you.
No, I agree. And I think it was really hope-filled for us. These guys are, 10 years down the track. We're in our first year. And clearly the work that's gone on to really land what that culture is, to use feedback loops, to keep refining it and to make sure that it does resonate off people's lives, both professionally and personally, is really, really evident now. I think we can fast-track some things because we've learnt from them and they are learning from each other all the time. That was really evident. There's a real nice competitive streak among them, but also a very collegial set of relationships across those multi-academy trusts of people recognising that they're all in similar circumstances with students with great need, and therefore when something works, we need to share it. We learnt a lot from them that we can then use to make sure that things here in Sandhurst get off the ground as quickly as we can without, as you say, making it feel like it's too fast and it's rushed and it's, being done to people.
And I think that work together we saw directly, and it was pre-trip, and we spoke to that when we had our pre-trip podcast, but every single trust would jump on whenever we needed 2 or 3 times or more beforehand. That preparation before our trip, I think, really helped us. But the sharing that we've felt as we set up Magnify in Australia, I felt really privileged that just extended to our trip over there. And I know people have been in touch with us since, and we're catching up with some at some point soon. Just the willingness of people to just share
policy
so freely is extraordinary.
Yeah, real intellectual property, like genuine things that they had developed, processes, thinking, policies, the whole bit. But just being able to sit in the room and rub shoulders with people who've grappled with the same things we're grappling with and just test, we were thinking this, but they've said, you might want to consider this element of it, or you're a bit ahead of us in that. We did hear that a few times, which was lovely too. So we were able to reciprocate. But this genuine sense as a set of systems in education that we all have a common goal and we all can actually share instead of protecting our own little part of the world. They really led by example in that. It was fantastic.
You just touched on it then in terms of that affirmation of getting some feedback, and I felt the whole journey or experience was part of affirmation around the multi-school organisation. Obviously, we read the paper. We've been in touch with Amy and Jordana from Grattan. We've set up a lot of our processes based on our learning from that report, and obviously we've implemented that this year across all of our schools. There were so many days, nearly every day, that you could go into one of the trusts or one of the schools and go, that's that thing that was in that paper. It really brought it to life. And I think the way that we've been able to start that work's really, really important.
And, you know, we came home with so many ideas, like pages and pages and pages of wouldn't it be good if, and maybe we should try X, Y, or Z. But as the last few months have progressed, Tim, we have started thinking about next year and beyond, and some things are already in place. Let's turn to that. So some things came out of that trip that have definitely influenced where we're headed, but a lot of where we're headed was actually born out of feedback that we had from our schools around the programs that were already up and running and what needed to be put in place. So do you want to just run us through, I'm sure most people in our schools have heard this, but just to remind everyone, this is, you know, what Magnify is and what it's going to be in 2026. So what's coming down the pipeline now?
And a big part of that has come directly from one of the schools that we visited, and we'll close out the discussion about the trip here, but one of the schools we visited from the Star Academy, the primary school, unbelievably challenging circumstances and clientele, as we would put it.
Literally a car on fire out the front of the school, literally.
And the principal that shared with us at the end of a very, very, very long day, and I'm not sure, Kate, if you can remember, you said, so what is it that's taken you from the 66th percentile to the 99th percentile? And they had targets to extend and improve further. And that principal said, go hard and go early. And I think that that's something that we knew that we needed to keep working on here. And we know that, as Pam Snows continue to refer to, and we're catching up with Pam for a podcast in the coming weeks, but that Aero report that spoke about only 20% of kids catching up from year 3 onwards really struck us before the trip in conversation. But to see that school and that principal say, we've had to really go hard early. Where are they at? What are we going to do to invest to get it right for those kids, to give them every possible chance? And we know that expects a lot then from our F1-2 teachers and, of course, the 3-4s. But to go hard, go early is a big part of the work. So we're going to be doing an oral language screener that is part of the assessment of students' capacity to learn in that area. We know that's a critical piece to their literacy skills and capacities. So,
and then an intervention program to follow that screener for those kids who need it.
So kids that need it, targeted intervention that Lauren Cook and her team are all over. So great credit to Lauren and their involvement in that. We're doing a targeted writing program, which we are a full 12 months ahead of the rest of the release of this with Multilit.
And this is really directly out of lots of feedback from our schools, isn't it? That the writing was not there in F1-2 in the way that it needed to be. So we went out and found it and pushed Multilit a little bit, and they've come to the party with this amazing early release for us. It's very exciting.
They have. It's very, very exciting. And Anna Taylor in particular at Multilit, but I know Ian Rothwell and the team are really, really excited for us to kick into it as Australia's first. It has been trialled for 4 years with amazing success. But you're right, Kate. People said to us, what about writing? We're doing some work with Multilit in spelling as well. What about oral language? We've got to assess that if we're going to truly grow kids in their literacy space and the numeracy space. And so the numeracy with the Centre for Independent Studies, we're going to have a number check that'll happen at Foundation and Year 1 with some pointed diagnostics that can follow us and link in with our Ochre curriculum as we continue to work with the Ochre team.
So important. And even more important now, there was an article in the paper just over the weekend about these kids coming into our schools this year, the children who were born in COVID. And we don't quite know yet what we need to know about them. So to have these screeners in place nice and early, and then the intervention program to back up so that we are genuinely hand on heart going hard and going early with kids who may have been behind their peers in these spaces means the future looks bright for these children down the line.
And I think to be able to intervene sooner is such a key from all of the learning from all of our research that we've done, to be able to identify where is the need and what are we going to do about it? What does the data say? But more importantly, what are we going to do about it? I think are some pretty are some important adjustments for us to make.
So that's our
spelling at 3-4 next year. So very excited about doing that, and the continuation of our work with Ochre and our partnership with Max in English and science we're thrilled about. So we'll be entering into science in our primaries and secondaries. So 7 and 8, English and science, kicking off to join the maths that's already in place there. So
science, this is the thing that really excites me. The other is we just absolutely had to do it. There was an absolute moral imperative that we sorted out literacy and numeracy and made sure there was a coherent, knowledge-rich curriculum there for our kids. But to be able to turn to science straight up, first, DICE's school system to have this coherent science curriculum in place, knowing that primary schools for a long time have struggled to have coherence in the science curriculum and to find time to do it well. And a lot of teachers don't have the confidence to teach science well in the primary school years. To know that our kids are starting with a knowledge-rich science curriculum right from early all the way through, it means that once they hit secondary and they're going into that deeper knowledge, the more complex systems and things that they need to know, they're going to have the foundational knowledge, which means they're going to be able to travel further. They're going to be able to know more. And the intersection of science and maths and all of our kids having this really strong grounding in science and maths, when we know they are two areas here in Australia where we struggle to get kids to follow through into year 10, 11 and 12 with those subjects. I think we in Sandhurst have really put our money where our mouth is and said, no, this needs fixing and we're going to do something about it. So I just can't wait to see the science work come through and see those little ones have exposure to a good science curriculum, but also that coherence of curriculum be followed through 7, 8, 9, 10, right up to going into those VCE subjects.
I think the knowledge-rich curriculum was something that really struck me again in England. We can talk about it here, but we saw examples of schools in England at that one room that we went into. I can still remember a teacher in Year 9 saying to the student when they asked a question, that relates to that thing we did in Year 8 second semester there, which relates to that thing you did early in term 1 or whatever they call it in Year 8 and that thing in Year 7. The knowledge of the teacher to be across that knowledge-built curriculum was quite extraordinary.
And no, it was definitely taught.
Yeah.
There was no gaps in the knowledge. Every topic was covered. Yeah.
And so I just think as we progress further, what the entry to our secondaries is going to look like for these students that have undertaken science through the primary years, to reiterate your point, make it so much more coherent, and they have to increase with increased level of skills because, as you say, it's been absent through all good efforts, it's been absent in a lot of cases in the past. Yeah. That knowledge-rich piece connects directly with our instructional model that's launched since our last podcast in season 1, and it's landed particularly well based around our work that we've done with Jared Cooney-Horvath, who Jared's also joining us shortly for another podcast as a bit of an update. But following Jared's work and the development of this increased understanding around cognitive science and the science of learning, our instructional model captures all aspects of all that we've already spoken about today, and the knowledge-rich piece is key to that. So we're really excited by the work that's happening in that space, and we're about to undertake a session with our learning leaders, or by the time this goes to air, we'll have just done a session with our learning leaders through Teachwell, really looking at that gap that exists that we have currently between the theory and the operational tools and the doing in terms of the instructional practice is the injection that we're having with Teachwell, notwithstanding the ongoing training and development of our instructional coaches with Step Lab that, to be fair to them, have got a fair weight on their shoulders, and as they continue to train and progress, they'll be ready to take up the slack in a couple of years' time.
So there's a couple of new cohorts going into Step Lab next year too, aren't there? How many are we taking in?
Yeah, the first cohort is 120, and they'll continue our training in the first semester next year. And then another cohort will follow semester 2. So really picking up that, and we know that those people have more of an impact when they also have more staff from our schools positively understanding our instructional model and the Teachwell work that's happening in 5 to 8, and we'll have some Year 9 maths teachers there as well, some really targeted work around that quality of instruction and delivery of instruction in Ochre maths.
Fantastic. And just picking up Jared too, I know he's got a book coming out soon about ICT and its overuse in schools, and really looking at the science of learning and where ICT devices fit within that. And we've made some big moves for our schools next year, significantly reducing the number of devices in schools and how much our students will be exposed to those resources. They will be used when the time is right, and that will be a lot less than what they perhaps had been using them in schools over the last 10 or 15 years. We've learnt so much through the neuroscience, through just a good psychology around how learning occurs, and we'll be making adjustments. Secondaries at this point in time are going to continue more or less as they have been, except in those subjects that are starting to transition over to Ochre. And of course, in those subjects, there will be a reduction in the use of devices. But it's certainly a hot topic around Australia, and we're probably, as one of the countries that had the most devices moved into our classrooms over the last 10 or 15 years, we're writing or correcting the course to what we know now and what other countries have been doing for some years now.
And I found that mind-blowing in England. They were shocked, weren't they, when we had a discussion around
I think we barely saw a device.
Where are the devices? They said, what do you mean? They could not understand that we had gone to one-to-one as rapidly as we did now all those years ago. And, of course, we've made our judgment and discernment on what's been rolled out in schools next year based on other things. But I think Jared was key in really raising this front and centre for us again in his session with us in April. And I had, and I'm sure you did too, Kate, lots of school leaders saying, hey, what are we doing here with this tech thing and what is our response? And we were together somewhere the other day when Jen Buckingham spoke about the attention thief that tech can be for kids and kids learning.
For all of us. Let's not just say it's the kids. I think we all have an attention thief sitting on our desk and in our hands far too frequently.
I think it's really important to note, just to finish out that Ochre development as well, that we've had our people invest into the science and the English writing and the expert group and the content creators or the curriculum writers. And there's really a localised level of ownership of some of that work, and a big thanks and credit to those people that have been part of that process. We know it's only going to add value to our work in our schools.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's kind of exciting for me in all of this is, with Ochre rolling into secondary, we've got our first cohort of grade sixes rolling into secondary school, so doing that big change from primary to secondary. And yet in our Sandhurst system, they're walking into secondary schools that have the same processes around creating calm classrooms and routines that help them just settle straight in to what the learning is about and how they get to know each other in a safe, warm, comfortable classroom, how their attention is focused on what the core intention of the lesson is. So they've got that. They've got a style of learning that they're familiar with the Ochre resources. And they've got teachers who feel calm and confident that they are receiving students who actually, even though they come from a whole lot of different schools, are pretty much familiar with the same way of being in the classroom. It's going to mean a really strong start to year 7 for these kids, I think. And I know a lot of the teachers are really looking forward to that next year.
I agree, and I think that we just continue to hear stories around the positive impact our people in our schools have had as those kids enter into secondaries. And if you think through a bit of a summary of that, our F-2 teachers in this notion of go hard and go early and the pivotal role that they play, the 3 to 6 teachers in continuing that work and really looking as kids have under our instructional model a deeper capacity for that knowledge to commence being built in the foundation of that. The secondary 7 to 9 really spill into the implementation of math, science, English, and not to mention, of course, our source of life, RE curriculum. But that calm classrooms that's happened through the course of all of our schools, but particularly in that space in early secondary, and our 10 to 12 teachers that have really jumped in response to and after Jared's session. Craig Simpson led some small snippets of sessions for our VCE teachers. And of course, they've started the modules with the blueprint through the Learning Made Easy at the minute as well. So it's really a great team effort. F to 12, and I know our leaders have been a fundamental part of the big shift too.
Yeah, absolutely. So some other things that are coming up for next year, just to give a bit of a primer for where we're headed. One of the areas I spoke about earlier, that whole sense of articulating a very explicit culture for our organisation. There's been a team of school leaders and some from the office bouncing off different people from outside of our organisation and inside our organisation who've done some pretty amazing work on a coherent, explicit culture for CESL, and that will be launched at the start of next year, and will just give all of we adults who work in this organisation common language around who we are, what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and what it is that we are going to leverage to succeed and to continue to grow, because we've started something pretty incredible. And to keep that momentum going, to keep that drive that we saw in England in those school systems operating at the level that we've all experienced this year, and to really be clear about the why, be absolutely laser focused on who our kids are and what their needs are and what we're going to do to support them in the very best outcomes across their 13, or for those who start with us in kinder, potentially their 18 years with us, that we are absolutely together in knowing what that is, so that we can move forward with strength into the next 5, 10, 15 years. So that explicit culture is one thing that's coming, and that I think a lot of staff are going to feel quite energised by, and hopefully quite relaxed by too in some ways, because it takes away again some of the cognitive work that they need to be doing around the why and even the how of who we are as an organisation. The other thing is the wellbeing curriculum, which we spoke about earlier this year, and we've had a team working on that across 2025 with a view that it would launch for the start of 2026, and it is essentially ready to launch, tier 1, tier 2 interventions, and then tier 3 ready to go as well. So while schools have been doing a good job in this space, a number have been doing it on their own, and a lot of people's resources have been stretched because of that. So in the same way that we've built a behaviour curriculum and we've built learning and teaching model, instructional model, and the curriculum, the knowledge-rich curriculum to set around it, we've gone out and looked for the very best partners that we could to make sure that our wellbeing curriculum, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, is a coherent meshing of all of the best resources that we can access in our regional part of the world, and then how we can leverage off organisations in other places as well. So they'll both be launched right at the start of next year, and there'll be lots of training and bits and pieces associated with those as well. We've also got work going on behind the scenes in business services, and I know for a lot of you this isn't, your home bread and butter, but there is a lot of work being done to help ensure that our processes in behind your schools and in behind what's happening at the school level are as calm and ordered as possible, so that the work of the people in the school environment can be focused on what matters most, on the children, on their learning, on building the capacity of adults to do the best job that they possibly can. So that's taking up a fair bit of our energy behind the scenes as well, and there'll be more of that rolling out across the coming years too. So, lots of energy being put in different places to build a system that enables every single child to flourish, whether they're in our biggest primary school or our tiniest one or our biggest secondary school or our most remote secondary school, whatever the case might be. No child is left with a gap if we can help it.
And I think further on that goal setting piece is we had stated really clearly early that favourable to state average was our goal. And we know that until we have consistent and clean data sets to start from as a starting point, that's really difficult to measure and set targets around. So a big thank you to all of our people in the schools that have worked with us this year on that assessment and data schedule and the collection and collation of that data. And it was wonderful in term 3 to be able to share lots of that back to the schools and to work through that as a team to say, where are we in our Sandhurst ecosystem and what does that look like compared to some others around the country and around the world for that matter. Really now to be able to step into next year, the next gear of that with some targets and aspirations that will sit next year and beyond. I think something that we look forward to sharing with our schools. And it's great that we've already got just a few little green shoots coming out with some data that we're seeing later this year that we don't want to go too early, but it's certainly wonderful to see some green shoots in the areas of our year 1 phonics and some Dibbles improvement and some initial lit that have gone in their cumulative assessment from more red to much, much more green. And I had a great conversation with one of our principals the other day about their year 7 and 8 maths data in the PAT, just showing a bit of a lift in the PAT maths compared to the same starting point for a cohort previously. So it's great to see some green shoots, and we look forward to developing out those targets a bit further in the new year.
And I think we're actually going to be sending out some people to do some recordings from each of the schools, because while we've got the data that we're, starting to see some patterns come through, those stories that we continue to hear out of classrooms of kids who are exceeding expectations in ways that we just could not have anticipated in this very first year. And that's both across primary and secondary. And to walk into some of our schools and see those routines in action, to move between classes and see the joy on the staff faces and the kids, just so engaged and interested in what's happening and so trusting of the way that they're being taught and comfortable with that. It's really, the stories of the how and the doing and the struggles and all those sorts of things, but these beautiful little vignettes of real children and real lives and parents even who come and say, I don't know how many times I've heard from our staff, parents coming in and saying, oh, I've got one in prep or grade 1 this year, but their older siblings, they're so much further ahead, these little ones. It's clear what's happening in the classroom is making an enormous impact on the capacity of those children to grow in their learning across a year. And for parents to be picking that up, I mean, that's the cream on the top of this cake or whatever it is that we're building.
And I'm giggling. I started giggling before you said the cream then, Kate, but I'm giggling because Ash Marsh told a story the other day at our partners meeting. We have one each term, and Ash shared a story about a sleepover that he had heard around some of students from various Sandhurst schools, and they weren't sleeping so well, and it was just nearing 1 a.m. and he heard through the hallway chatter, okay, need your attention, 5, 4, did the countdown, the call to attention, and they're asleep. That even works at a sleepover party.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
We do need to tell the parents about that one. We have got some other exciting things coming up next year. Peps and Josh from Step Lab are coming out to Australia, and they're going to be doing some work with us here in Sandhurst. I know there's a lot of fans of those two and their work online. It'll be great to have them in the room with us and working with our people. What else have we got coming up?
Jared's back.
Yay.
So we've got a learning and teaching day for the whole system at the start of term 2 again. We'll really turn this into an annual occurrence, but Jared's back to be our keynote at the start of that day. It'll be a little bit different next year to it was this year. It's not 3 days, first of all, but we'll also target in for our staff around particular areas, whether or not it's, non-teaching staff or leaders or classroom teachers, to be able to give a little bit more choice and localised selection. But we're really excited to welcome Jared back, and we'll learn a bit more about that when we have our podcast release of his in a couple of weeks.
I know there's a lot of people keep saying to me as we move around, can't we have one of those big festivals where we all come together, go to Notre Dame and all hear from someone there? And please just know, yes, we do want to do that too. We just don't want to go too early. We want to make sure we've got a great lineup for you. So I don't think it's going to be next year, but saying it here and now, let's look ahead to 27 and really look for a big learning festival across Sandhurst all together in one place. Of course, we've also got Staff Spirituality Day, lots of great feedback from across the schools this year, some things that we're going to take on board and make some shifts in for next year. But, what a wonderful thing to be able to come together and really focus on our culture, focus on who we are, not just as a system and what it means to be a Catholic education system, but also what that means for the internal journey of everybody. So we'll be looking to build and improve on that in 2026 as well.
I think the part that would be remiss of us to not note here in reflection about the year that has been is the unbelievable work of our people in our schools that have been through enormous challenge, frustration, upset, and of course, absolute joy. But to manage all of that and to continue then to say to us, hey, what about, or what are we doing about? I've felt an amazing shift in the people's language to talk about we and us and ours. So I think that there's some amazing work taking place in our schools, but our staff have found it a challenging year.
I've got a theory on this. I think some of it is we kept saying at the start, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Our people wanted to be perfect. And how awesome is that? They wanted everything to just work straight up and to be absolutely, the best that it could be for the kids. And when it turned out, actually, you know what, we're all human and we've actually got to learn how to do things, and we have to practice and we have to rehearse and we have to do a different type of lesson many times before it feels natural and it feels like, yeah, this is actually working for me. That's where some rub happened, and that's just normal. What did we say? I think we looked up top down. That's right, as Jared taught us. But also, it takes not days, weeks, months to actually form new habits and get into new routines. And so while we all wanted the perfect, we had to be satisfied with the good. And now I think we're building in a lot of areas back towards perfect. And then there'll be new things coming into the mix that will get used to accepting the good until we build it up again to be perfect. But I really think that don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So much good has happened this year, just across any number of areas, from the capacity of our leaders to do amazing things and inspire their people and support their people to change, to what's happening in the classroom for staff, what's happening in the classroom for students, how the culture of schools feel with these new routines in place. So much good is taking place, and that success breeds success, doesn't it? So all these great wins that people have had this year are really just the next platform for even more wonderful things in our Sandhurst schools.
And if you're a classroom teacher listening to this, rest assured that unanimously every principal continues to refer and to reflect on how proud they are of their staff.
Oh, so much.
That have just carried so much through the course of the year, and their input that you have had directly on our kids is profound. So well done.
Yeah, and those feedback loops, this isn't working, we've got a gap here, this, needs to tighten up, all of that has continued to shape what it is that we're doing here. And I think that is one of the real strengths of this system, that it's the feedback from people literally at the chalk face coming back to those of us who are on the teams that are making decisions and discerning and talking to the experts in the field to bounce ideas off. That feedback loop is alive and well and really changing children's lives.
Kate, end of our podcast. I'm going to ask you first. We finish off with this question. What matters most from everything we've discussed today, or perhaps the UK trip piled on top of all that has been 2025 so far? What matters most?
I'm really struck that we're building something new here, that there isn't quite anything in Australia like what we're doing here in Sandhurst. But now that we have some models elsewhere in England to know what is possible and to understand that, I can see us really becoming a beacon for education in Australia. And, we'll have to get the runs on the board with the students' results, but everything is pointing in the right direction. And the only reason that is happening is because while I talked about we need to be more explicit in our culture and really understand who we are and then leverage that for improvement, we already had a good culture here in Sandhurst. We already had great people in our schools, both teaching and allied staff, who were committed to know better, do better. When we started using that phrase, it wasn't breaking new ground for our people. And as we said earlier in the year, there was a readiness for people to go, we're ready to try something new. And the fact that culture already exists of we're up for this and we're going to throw everything at it and we are going to trust the experts in their field and they know better and we are going to do better, that to me just leaves us in an amazing position to do something quite incredible in this part of the world. So that for me is what's really exciting, that we can see where pathways are, but we could only do it because we already had a great foundation here in Sandhurst. Tim?
I've just changed my mind. I had one going around in my head, now I've got two. Sorry, so I've got two things here. One, I think our people, as you just touched on before, only want to do really well. And it's such a unbelievable privilege to work with people who perhaps it plays out certain ways if they are stressed or frustrated or angered. But it's such a great lesson back personally to observe people that only feel the way they do or only act or behave the way that they have at different points, which has been fabulous in most cases because they care so much that I just don't want to get it wrong, so I'll go extra hard to make sure I get it right sometimes. And I think that's something that what matters most is that we have passionate people that care so much that perhaps there's times where they've been frightened to get it wrong, so it's impacted a capacity or a willingness to jump in, but gee, they care. So what matters most is the care that our professionals have to support the kids in Sandhurst. Coupled with that is that knowledge. And you could talk knowledge-rich curriculum, or could you just talk knowledge? Because our instructional model applies to life, and that we need to know stuff in order to help anyone. Our kids need to know content of curriculum in order to be able to share it more freely and explore that and all that goes with it. But again, if you think of knowledge from a different perspective for our staff in our schools, they know better. And of course, they're going to do better. So that whole notion of that learning that goes with our work is really important and pivotal. And it's been an absolute privilege to be part of the ride with people.
Yeah, it has. Thanks, Tim. I mean, that was just a good discussion for us to have, I think, because we don't get a lot of time to stop and just pause and think about where we've been and where we're going and why that's happening. So thank you for that. And for everybody who's listening along, we've alluded to some of the podcasts that are coming up in Series 2 over the next few weeks and months in the lead up to Christmas. And we'll look forward to sharing with you some really incredible discussions with people who are now approaching us to say, hey, I'd love to come and have a chat about this element of what you're doing. So all the best for everyone for the last few weeks of Term 4, and we'll look forward to coming back at you over the coming weeks and months. Thanks very much.
That's it for this episode of Magnify Matters. Make sure to follow the show and share it with someone who cares about great teaching and learning. You can also leave a review or connect with us online at Catholic Education Sandhurst. Until next time, stay with us as we magnify what truly matters.